Hi, I'm Brent Russell, owner of Tarrant County Pest Control. Welcome to the Apprentice Training Video C1. This is the third section. There are 10 categories that you have to have 2 hours of each category, so it's a total of 20 hours. And this is the third section. This is getting into this is going to be pesticide labels and label comprehension. This 2 hour segment is broke down into 4 videos. There'll be C1, C2, C3, and C4 for this section. And this will satisfy the requirements to get your apprentice. Well, you already have an apprentice license if you're watching this probably, and working on getting your technician license. So this is part of the training that is required to get your technician license. So let's get started. We're starting now on C1, which is pesticide labels and label comprehension. The pesticide label is very important. It tells you how to use the pesticide safely and correctly. Information on the label comes from years of careful testing and studies. When properly followed, label directions protect you, other people, and the environment. Each time you plan to use a pesticide, read the label completely. Don't rely on your memory. Labeling is all information the manufacturer provides about a product, including the label on the product container and package, specimen, labels, brochures, leaflets, and any separate information available from your pesticide dealer or a recognized authority. It is your responsibility to comply with all the available information. The label is information that is printed on, affixed to, or provided with a pesticide container. The label serves many purposes. To the state and federal government, the label is a way to control distribution, storage, sale, use, and disposal of pesticides. To the buyer or the user, the label is a source of facts on how to use pesticides correctly, safely, and legally. To the physicians, the label is a source of information on proper treatment for poisoning cases. The law requires you to use a pesticide according to the label instructions. This is pointed out on the label in the Direction for Use section of the statement that reads, "It is a violation of federal law to use this product in a manner inconsistent with its labeling. It is also illegal for anyone to recommend that you use a pesticide improperly." Each statement on the label meets government rules. The label itself, not just the pesticide, must be registered by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. The EPA registers pesticides only after they pass strict government tests. The tests confirm that a pesticide use according to its label direction should not pose an unreasonable risk to the public or the environment. Okay, now let's talk about signal words that are on pesticide labels. This is a single word that signals to you just how dangerous that pesticide is. So if you're looking to buy a pesticide, you can look real quickly with one word and tell what level of danger that this pesticide has. The label tells you which chemicals are in the container. The contents are listed in a standard form so that you know exactly what you're looking for or working with. Signal words. Signal words like danger, warning, or caution are used on most labels to let you know about the exact toxicity of the product. The label also lists the personal protective clothing and equipment applicators must wear to protect themselves from poisoning. The label lists use sites that are EPA approved. If your intended use or application site is not listed on the label, do not use the product until you check for additional labeling references. You are legally responsible for any accident or loss caused by an unapproved use. Generally, any non-labeled use is illegal. Recommended rates and application directions also appear on every label. They are helpful because they state the maximum rate allowed by law. However, local conditions may not require maximum rates to achieve good pest control. Use no more pesticide than is needed. Okay, let's take a look at the dilution chart for this on this label for some Talstar. Now, this is something that I commonly use. Is the Talstar P, which stands for professional. And anytime you're going to mix something, and say you're going to mix 1 gallon of it, or maybe you're going to mix 100 gallons of it in a large tank in the back of a truck. Well, this is the chart that you go to, and it'll tell you, you can look on there what the percent of active ingredient is. It'll tell you how much chemical to add in, and it also, for how many gallons that you want to mix up. So it would be very good to study these charts, learn how to use them, look them up frequently, make sure that you're mixing at the right rates. Sometimes we mix so many chemicals that it's hard to remember which one goes at what rate, and so you can always look on these charts real quick and make sure that you're doing it right. Okay, let's take a look at this dilution chart for Talstar P. Now let's assume, if you look at the top of this chart, you can see where my arrow is, and let's say that we're going to mix up 1 gallon in a hand sprayer of Talstar. Okay, so what we do is we look down here and we can see on this chart that this is how many ounces of Talstar that we would use. We would put this much Talstar in our hand sprayer, and this is the amount of active ingredient we will end up with over here in the far column, this AI, percent of active ingredient. Okay, so let's go back and let's look at this 1 gallon. Say we're going to mix up 1 gallon. Now, you can see that this is a pretty, what we refer to as a broad label. You can mix this, look over here on this left column at the percent of active ingredient, anywhere from 0.008% all the way up to 0.062% active ingredient. Okay, so how do you know what to mix it at? Well, that's going to take some experience and some trying, and depending on the pest and the situation, and are you treating inside or outside, you want to take all these things into consideration. If you're treating inside a house and you've got kids and family living in there, you probably are going to want to use a low percentage rate. But if you're fighting something like black widow spiders or scorpions, then you might need to use a higher rate. Depending on the label, look and see what you're using. But just as a general, okay, so let's just say we're doing a general pest treatment, and we're going to mix 1 gallon in a hand sprayer, and what I usually do is I use about a half of an ounce to 1 ounce per gallon. Okay, so if I use a half an ounce of Talstar in 1 gallon hand sprayer, that's going to mix it at 0.031%. If I put a whole ounce, 1 whole ounce in 1 gallon, then that's going to mix it at 0.062%. Okay, now this is the highest rate that you're allowed to mix at. Don't go over this rate, then you don't have to worry about poisoning people or kids or pets or people having allergic reactions and those things. Stay within these boundaries and you'll be okay. If you're getting good rate, if you're mixing it at a half an ounce per gallon and you're mixing it at 0.031%, then and you're getting good results, then you may want to stay there, or you might even want to back off a little bit and use a little less. But if you're not getting the results you want anymore, then you can add more. So this is the rate that I've found that at Telstar works really well, is I use about a half a ounce per gallon. But now let's take a look at if we're going to mix the truck. If I'm going to mix up in the big 50-gallon spray rig that's in the back of the truck so I can do a yard spray or a power spray around a house, then we're going to look way over here in this top right part of this chart where it says 100 gallons. Now, most of the spray rigs that go in the back of a pickup truck in Texas are going to be a 50-gallon rig. So this makes it really simple to figure. So instead of having to figure it at a 1-gallon rate times 50, I just simply look at this 100 gallon column, and when I'm spraying 25 or maybe 50 gallons on a yard, you really don't need to go any higher than this minimum rate. Okay, so I'll do this. I'll put says 12.5 ounces per 100 gallons, and I'm going to mix a 50-gallon tank, so half of that would be about 6.25 ounces. So I'll put 6.25 ounces to 50 gallons, and you're going to end up with the same rate. It's going to be 0.008%. Okay, so even though you're using half of the amount of Telstar, but you're using half of the amount of the water too. So this rate, this percent of active ingredient, is not going to change. So that's how I figure your percent of active ingredient, and you're required by law that when you use this, that you have to put down the product that you use, Telstar P, how much you used, 1 gallon, 5 gallons, however many, how much, 100 gallons, and you have to list the percent of active ingredient. And usually I'll do 1 gallon of Telstar at 0.03 or 0.031%, and that's how you would write that up on your chemical use sheets. Compatibility. The label usually states whether or not you can mix the chemicals with pesticides. Often fertilizers and pesticides can be combined for one application. However, such mixing destroys the effectiveness of other products. So, before you mix two products together, be sure that you check the label for compatibility. If there's any doubt, don't mix. Brand names. All the products have what's known as a brand name. You see, manufacturers usually give a unique brand name to their product so that it stands out. And then also, if it has its own unique name, that allows them to copyright that name and protect it. Well, that's why products with the same active ingredient have different names. The brand or the trade name shows up plainly on the front of the label. It also is the name that's used by the company's salespeople and in their advertisement. In this case, we're looking at this label of Telstar. Telstar is bifenthrin. Bifenthrin is sold by other trade names as well. The EPA classifies every use of every pesticide as either general use or restricted use. Only a certified applicator may use or supervise the use of restricted use products. The label of restricted use products must clearly show a statement such as restricted use pesticide, restricted due to underground caverns, for retail sales, and use only by certified applicators or persons under the direct supervision and only for those uses covered by the certified applicator's certification. Okay, so here's the deal about the restricted use pesticides. It's very important that these are used the proper way and not abused, especially for the farmers. See, what happens is the farmers put out a lot of pesticide, and when it rains, that pesticide gets washed down into the soil. Now, some pesticides have what are called leaching, and leaching means that it will easily go through the dirt and down into the ground. So there are some chemicals that if they leach too much, they'll go all the way down and get into the water system. And this is especially important in the state of Texas, because in Texas we have these things called aquifers. These aquifers are underground rivers, and they run all the way from North Texas all the way down into the hill country. And so if a farmer out in his field was to apply too much pesticide or not the right kinds of pesticide, and it was, say, a restricted use product due to the fact that it can leach in and get into the groundwater, well, if you did that wrong and he didn't follow those directions right and misapplied it, it's possible that that pesticide can leach all the way through the dirt and get down into the groundwater. And that water is a main water source for a lot of people in Texas, because they drill wells and they draw water up out of these wells, and that's the water that they're getting from. So it's restricted use pesticides are something that have to be watched really, really closely. When you are applying them, you have to watch those labels and make sure that you're doing it right. Okay, our next subject is net contents and ingredient statement. Now, the front panel of the label tells you that the net contents, that is, how much product is in the container. Each label also must list what is in the product in the section called the ingredient statement. The list shows active and inert ingredients and the amount of each. Active ingredients are the chemicals that control the target pest. They must be identified by both their chemical name and their common name. Most products also have inert ingredients. These are used as carriers to make the chemical more effective. Inert ingredients need not be named on the label. Okay, so let's take a look at what they're talking about here. First of all, they're talking about how much product. It says that the front panel of the label tells you the net contents. So if you look down here at the very bottom left-hand corner, you can see where it says 1 gallon, net contents. So all the labels have to tell you how much is in there. Then it also says it has to list the active ingredient. Well, in this product, the active ingredient is bifenthrin, 7.9%. And then it says it also has to list inert ingredients. And so here's your other ingredients. That could be other things that are added to the chemical to help it work. It could also just be water. It used to be, they mix these chemicals with diesel fuel and kerosene, but now most of them are water soluble, and so they mix them with water. Okay, so Telstar P, that's a trade name. Now let's take a look at the chemical name. A chemical name is a complex name that identifies a pesticide's chemical makeup. For example, a chemical name of the active ingredient 750WP is, well, this is the chemical name, naphthalene methylcarbamate. Okay, that's my best shot at pronouncing that. But as you can see, these names are not easy to say. They're even harder to remember. And so the chemical companies come up with the easier name to remember, 750% WP. So that's the difference between a chemical name and a trade name. Okay, types of pesticides and formulation. The type of pesticide usually is listed on the front of the label. This short statement tells what kind of pest and the product controls. So, for example, let's take a look at this Talstar. If you look at the very top, you can see my arrow here. And so here's our product, Talstar P. And right below it, it tells you that it's an insecticide. So you know that it's an insecticide, not a termiticide or a herbicide. So this is an insecticide, and it says right here, to control pests indoors and outdoors on residential, institutional, public, commercial, and industrial buildings, greenhouses, animal confinement facilities, livestock premises, kennels, food handling establishments, and lawns, ornamentals, parks, recreational areas, and athletic fields. It says that when used with a termiticide, individuals or firms must be licensed by the state to apply termiticide products. Okay. So it gives you a quick example right there of Talstar and what it does. Let's look at another one, for example. This is a close-up of that statement. Okay. This one, here's your common name, and then right below it, it tells you prevents adult mosquitoes emergence. Here's one called Pest No More. Tells you that it's a herbicide in this case. It controls grasses and grassy weeds. So very quickly you can look at these pesticides and tell right away what they're for by just reading that statement, and that'll give you a general idea if that's what you're looking for in the pesticide that you have. A single pesticide often is sold in different formulations or mixtures, such as a liquid, an aerosol, or a granular. The label may name the formulation, or it may show only abbreviations such as WP for wettable powder and D for dust. Okay, so let's talk about that for just a minute. Here's a good example of two different products with the same name, but they're made completely different. For example, this Talstar P, which the P stands for professional in this case. This is a liquid product. I commonly use this in the hand sprayers and in the spray rig. It's, like I say, in a liquid form, so it mixes very easy. But you have to have the right equipment to be able to mix and apply this type. Now, as opposed to this product, Talstar PL, is a granular insecticide. So, same name, sounds very similar. Talstar P is a liquid, but the Talstar PL is a granular. Now, if you don't have a hand sprayer or a spray rig mounted in back of your truck and you can't apply a liquid, then, but say you do have a spreader, a fertilizer spreader. Well, this product, because it's in a granular form, you can pour this into your spreader and then put it out over the yard and get really good coverage. It works really well that way. What they've actually done here is when you open it, it's a fine sand is what it really is. And they've taken the sand and then treated that sand with the chemical. And when you put that down in the yard, when the bugs crawl across that and they get it on them, because this particular product, Talstar, has a residual, which means that it'll stay there for a while, and they walk across it and they get it on them and it'll kill them. So you can see that these are both Talstar. They both have bifenthrin in them, which is the active ingredient. However, they come in two completely different forms. Even though they're both called Talstar, one is a liquid and one is a granular. Registration and establishment numbers. You will need these numbers in case of an accidental poisoning, claims of misuse, or faulty product or liability claims. An EPA registration number appears on all pesticide labels. Let's take a look at the Talstar P label. Okay, look right down here. Let's zoom in on this, and right here is your EPA registration number. Okay, so if you have a problem, you have a lawsuit, you have a doctor, that somebody gets sick or something like that, it's this EPA number that they can go to, and they can look up this number and find the exact chemical, the makeup of it, and the things that they need to know. So it's very important that you have access to this. The law requires you to be able to provide a label if you're asked for it. So if you know where these labels are, at least if you can go online and pull them up, you can have access and you know where this information is. So that's your EPA registration number. It's on every bottle of pesticide. The remaining parts of the label pertain to proper product use rather than product identification. These important parts include signal words and symbols, precautionary statements such as the reentry statement, storage and disposal instructions, and of course the directions for use. Okay, now let's review with a few questions. Question number 1. The words "keep out of reach of children" must appear on all pesticides. True or false? The answer is true. The words "keep out of reach of all children" must appear on all pesticide labels. That is an EPA rule. Last question, true or false? Highly toxic products must carry a signal word. True or false? The answer is true. They must carry a signal word that says danger.